Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Indxx Insights Podcast series. Where we bring together experts to decode market trends. I'm your host, Rahul Sen Sharma, and today we're diving into one of the most transformative forces in the global economy, artificial intelligence. Joining us today, again, from our offices in India, is Vaibhav Agarwal, our Chief Product Officer. Vaibhav, welcome once again to the show and the podcast.
Thanks, Rahul. It's great to be back here to discuss this fascinating technology, which is basically reshaping the industries globally.
I'm looking forward, I have to say, to another educational and insightful discussion. I've been doing a lot of detailed reading in the space, and there really seems to be a myriad of ways in which artificial intelligence is being used across industries. Some of the really interesting examples that I've come across are one, a company called Illumina and their 3D algorithm that predicts disease-causing genetic mutations. Another is AI systems that are outperforming medical professionals when it comes to cancer detection, in particular skin cancer detection and lung cancer detection as well. And also AI being used to boost productivity across financial institutions. So I think because of these examples, as well as so many others that are happening that our viewers have probably read about or heard about, the market seems to be exploding. And when I looked at the numbers, the data seems to be absolutely true that the growth rates of AI adoption and investing in revenue, 36%, $214 billion last year to $1.3 trillion by 2030. So my first question really is, what's driving this expansion?
It's really fascinating, Rahul. I'm just going to actually step back a little and just for our viewers here, I mean, AI is not new. It's new in the form that we see it today, but Tesla has been around for a while, and self-driving does not come without AI. So it's just that the adoption across industries has been unprecedented. To my knowledge, I think about 72% of the organizations across industries have, in some way or the other, adopted AI as of 2024. And it was just about 50% back in 2020. So if you look at the adoption across industries, and you mentioned Illumina, there's Tesla, and there's so much more applications, whether in healthcare or in defense, it just spans industries. And the growth is basically being fueled by several factors coming together at the right time. We have massive amounts of data available, and not just any data, good data available. We've been capturing data for a while, and we know data is being regarded as the new oil. And so with the data that we have now and the models, the computing power that these new AI chips created by the likes of NVIDIA allow us, I mean, the rapid expansion and the evolution of the space has been tremendous to observe. So data, your computing power, and also now supported by the investments from both corporations and governments alike. So these three factors are what I believe are driving the expansion across industries globally.
Wow. Those are really good data points. Thanks for sharing all of those. And I looked at the actual amount of spending that's going to be required, $630 billion for the things that you mentioned, as well as overall just AI spending. When you look at it in terms of GDP, that would be the 21st or 22nd largest economy in the world today. That alone, $630 billion, is more than the GDP of a country like Argentina or Ireland. And when you look at the broader now economic impact, not just the GDP, it's even more striking because AI is expected to add around $13 trillion to the global economy by 2030, which is a boost of more than 1% to global GDP. It's massive. And that GDP amount is as much as Germany, Japan, India, really the third, fourth, fifth, sixth largest economies in the world, is the amount of additional GDP value that AI is expected to cause and result in the next 5 years. So let me shift gears a little bit here and say that let's look at some of the regions and let's talk about what's happening from an AI perspective in those regions. And let's start with Asia Pacific. That area in particular seems to be emerging as a really dynamic market. Can you tell us a bit about what we're seeing in terms of regional developments, starting with Asia Pacific?
You're right. I mean, the advancement in the AI space has been global. Of course, people expect North America and the United States to lead that race, and it has to a certain extent. What we're seeing in Asia Pacific and countries like China, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, It's really phenomenal to see. I mean, the kind of technology being created or the chips being manufactured, for example, in Taiwan. I mean, South Korea investing deep amounts of money in their AI infrastructure projects. We all know DeepSeek. Look at the kind of market impact it had on the US stocks. Even Nvidia, I think, fell by about $500 billion, if I'm not mistaken, in a short period of time. So I mean, people expected, to be honest, that North America will always lead this. DeepSeek came out of syllabus, so to say, but it's not just that. I mean, it's all going to be good for players across the globe. I mean, the advancement in technologies that possibly China is making, the new models at a fraction of the cost from today's models. The technology investment that Korea is making, about 7 billion from the last figures that I heard, with regard to maintaining their competitive advantage in the AI chips market. Asia Pacific is really leading the race, which to an outsider or a non-investor in those markets is not very evident, but it's out there.
So you talked a little bit about North America. You talked more about Asia Pacific. What about Europe? How are they? I'm very curious, actually. How are they positioning themselves in this space?
It's interesting. Europe, in terms of their recent advances, and not just in technology, in other spaces as well, have taken a more balanced approach. You know, we saw it with ESG and other things as well there. They've tried to balance that out, the ethics of it all with the technological advancement. And I think it's a good thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. That does not put Europe in terms of a leadership position in this space. But I think they've recently announced, the European Union, to invest about $4 billion in generative AI through to 2027. Now, $4 billion is not a big amount compared with the numbers that you threw before or that we know. But in terms of their pace of adoption, I think it's equal to other regions across the globe. And that said, I mean, I think we're going to see a very different kind of adoption coming in from Europe, in that they will be more balanced in terms of, you know, the uh, really the advantages of it balanced with the ethics of it. So that's where Europe is at as compared to other regions.
That's very interesting, and that actually matches up well with what Europe does in other industries. You look at the asset management and ETF industry as well. You know, they tend to have a mixture of regulation, bureaucracy,
Yeah.
but also trying to do things, you know, threading the needle from an AI and an ethical perspective as well. That's always difficult. So that's really interesting, Vaibhav. Let's shift now to talk about generative AI, because I'm sure our listeners and viewers would like to learn more about that, and in particular, ChatGPT. It was the most successful technology launch in history. 100 million monthly active users just 2 months after launch. Can you just share some insights about generative AI as a sector and what's happening there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting segue into a particular application of AI. I mean, I was on Grok, which is from probably the second most influential person in the states today, Elon Musk, XAI. The way these models, the generative AI models, whether it's ChatGPT or Cloud or Grok, the way they've evolved rapidly beyond just text generation, we're now seeing remarkable applications across not just text, so video, audio, code generation. I mean, I don't know what will happen to all the developers out there in a few years' time. In banking and financial services sector where we are at, I always consider three things to be very important. I mean, automation, documentation, and data. And generative AI can help us in all three, and it is helping companies in all the three areas. By some estimates, it could boost front office productivity by about 35%. Just the generative AI adoption, and we're not even talking about other AI techniques that are out there, and that could potentially generate an additional $3.5 million per employee in revenues for these companies. Just imagine the amount of impact that generative AI alone can have on our day-to-day businesses. All the major players have recognized this potential, with companies like Google and Microsoft. We talked about Cloud, Grok, and Google has Gemini. Microsoft has Copilot, which is on your laptops now. It's right there. And they've realized it and they've adopted it for us to use, and leverage.
Well, those data points are fascinating, and the market numbers tell an equally fascinating story as well. I mean, we're looking at growth from $20.9 billion last year to $137 billion by 2030. So, what's truly mind boggling is the broader economic impact. You kind of hinted at it with some of the data points you mentioned, but from what I've read, generative AI is expected to contribute between 2.5 and $4.5 trillion annually to the global economy in the next few years. That's more than the sixth largest economy, the UK, and their entire GDP of $3.3 trillion in 2023. I mean, these figures, and I reference the countries because I'm trying to illustrate just how transformative and impactful this technology is becoming. While there are multiple advantages that AI and its adoption present, what about some of the challenges and some of the risks that investors and businesses should be aware of when it comes to AI and generative AI?
Interesting question. But just to recap a little, so we've referenced, I believe, about five of the top 10 economies already in terms of the impact that AI has had. I mean, leave the top two, and AI has already contributed a combination of all those GDPs out there. So that's the impact we're talking about. I always like that dialogue from the movie Spider-Man: with great power comes great responsibility, and AI is no different. We spoke about the ethical considerations that the European Union is taking in adopting AI. And I think it is very important for organizations and governments also to think about data quality, data privacy, the ethical implications, and the need for skilled talent. There's also the challenge of integration. Now, successful implementation requires careful planning, robust infrastructure, and cultural adaptation, which will become very important. We don't see it right now, but it will become very important as more and more companies and governments across the world adopt AI into their day-to-day businesses.
Okay, so given all of that, what trends should our listeners watch out for in the coming months and years in the AI space?
Well, the AI will tell us. That's the nature of the space. I mean, on a more serious note, I think we need to watch out for continued development, innovation in generative AI, increased adoption across more industries than it currently than what it is presently, and new developments in AI chip technology. I mean, the chip prices are going to go down. They have to, and that's how technologies evolve. Look at the defense sector. I mean, there is huge amount of applications there. Now we brought the ethical aspect in. We have to be careful there as well while considering investing in those sectors or adopting AI in those sectors. Uh, Look at its applications in energy infrastructure, supply chain. I think the logistics are already handled to a very large extent by AI systems across the globe. Grid optimization within energy, decarbonization efforts, healthcare, curing diseases or catching diseases well in advance than even doctors or very well versed engineers can. I mean that. So the advances in across the industries and across sectors is going to be huge. Investors do need to consider the advances and balance them out with the risks, as do the companies. And I think we're in for a treat. I think as far as AI goes for the next few years.
So thanks for that, Vaibhav. I think before we wrap up, my final question is, what's your key takeaway from all of this for listeners interested in the AI space?
I'd say AI it's not a trend. It's basically a transformative way of working. It's going to be very pervasive. It already probably is in some sectors more than others. It's going to change how we work, how we innovate, how we solve problems. I think whether you are an investor or a business leader or a professional or an employee doing your day-to-day desk job, I think understanding AI's capabilities and implications is going to be very crucial in the next few years. The key here is to stay informed, be strategic about adoption, and think long term. About how AI can create value in the context of your day to day work.
And with that, we come to the end of our podcast. Vaibhav, thanks as always for the great insights. Thank you all for watching this episode of the Indxx Insights Podcast. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share this episode if you found it valuable. See you on the next episode.
Thanks, Rahul. Always a pleasure speaking with you, and see you next time.